I'd like to get this started so that we can get everybody home on a Wednesday evening finally. So, my name is Kara Baylog. I'm the watershed coordinator with the Shasta Valley Resource Conservation District, and we're really excited to begin this year's Forest Stewardship Workshop Series with an interesting topic, EQIP and how it's being used for forest restoration. In this case, we're going to be looking at the Black Butte Center for Railroad Culture's work on approximately 40 acres of forest land and how they're using the Natural Resource Conservation Program, EQIP, the Environmental Quality Improvement Program, in order to get some of this work done. So we're going to start off with Bruce Shoemaker, who is a board member at the Black Butte Center for Railroad Culture. And then following a presentation about what's been going on his land and the process that he went through as a landowner, we're going to invite up James Dunhay, who is the forester with the Natural Resource Conservation Service. He's been a forester there at NRCS since last June, coming from the Mendocino National Forest before that. So I'd like everyone to just pay attention and listen to this interesting workshop, and hopefully you can go home with some knowledge that can help you also effectively steward your forest as well. So without further ado, I'm going to invite up Bruce Shoemaker to begin his presentation in video.
Hi, good evening everybody. I've been going to these forest workshops for the last couple of years, so it's fun to be on this side of the room. So back in 2007, I was living in Minnesota, and we had a group of people that would come every year to camp around Dunsmuir and Black Butte area, because we all like trains, and we would go camp by the train tracks at Black Butte, and we go to the Dunsmuir Railroad Days celebration. And then we decided we just wanted our own place, and then it turned out that this junkyard was abandoned, the old Black Butte auto wrecking yard out in South Weed, and I think we started talking to them in 2003, and in 2007 we finally talked them down enough in the midst of an oncoming recession to buy the land. I was the landowner, and I am the landowner, but right from the start was a very cooperative endeavor of a whole group of people that were basically really into trains in different ways. We have, I know our president of our board is an engineer for Amtrak, and we have I know a lot of people that just artists or just people that like trains. And we wanted a place out in the woods to watch trains and just kind of hang out and camp, and didn't really realize it would become such a full-time, endeavor. And we eventually, in the first year we got the land, we formed a nonprofit, the Black Butte Center for Railroad Culture, to be sort of our mechanism to organize the land. And over the next couple of years, we brought 5 historic rail cars to the land, 3 cabooses and 2 boxcars, mostly from McLeod, where everything was going out of business. And then we started having a lot of art and music shows there, and attached to this, our main focus had been this compound of a few acres where we were doing most of our projects, but it was actually a 35-acre parcel of land of forest, and we thought, great, we'll just have all this natural forest to go camping in and have sort of hangout spots. And then, and actually then in 2011, there was the neighboring landowner had wanted to do a lot of development between sort of the pilot truck stop and our land, and that all collapsed, and they were interested in contracting a bit, so we were able to do a boundary line adjustment and add 15 more acres, so we went up to 50 acres. And I think just realized that over time how bad these forests were, what bad shape they were in. It was really, I came from Minnesota, where there's a lot more rainfall, and the northern forests are really dense and lush, and had mostly been in the east before that. And so the concept of how wide open a western mixed conifer ponderosa dominated forest was really a learning experience for me. And I started going to these workshops. I learned a lot, and our whole group did, about fire ecology and just how different, and started to realize the terrible things that were the legacy on our land. One was that about a little over half of it had been planted as a pine plantation, just rows of trees. But then after they'd done that, the land had been sold for development, and so nobody took care of it for the next 30 years. It was planted, and maybe it was only under the Southern Pacific Land Company for a handful of years, and then since then nothing happened to it. And then there was big brush fields of bitter brush or antelope brush, which grew up and should have been, in a normal fire cycle would have been taken care of after 15 or 20 years. But they grew up, and then all these trees, so there was all this dead brush and everywhere, and we realized what a terrible fire hazard it was, and then started to learn about how bad it was for wildlife and how it just didn't, it wasn't actually good habitat. And at first I was really resistant to doing a lot of cutting because I thought, well, maybe the people can't go in there, it's so dense, but it's got to be good for wildlife, maybe it's better to keep the people out of some of these areas. And I just didn't get it, that actually what we had was really terrible for wildlife. There was nothing to eat on the ground because everything had died, and it was just this canopy of pine trees up on top. So anyway, we made a movie. A guy who lives in Weed, Kevin Sita, filmed some of our work last year as we were first really getting, we'd applied for the NRCS, and we're just getting going, learning about grant opportunities, and realized we really need to start doing some work. So I'm going to show that movie. It's actually not the full movie. If you want to see the full movie, I think it's only 21 minutes long. This is more like 14. But we have it on our Black Butte YouTube site, which if you just look up Black Butte and forestry on YouTube, you can see the whole thing. But this is a short version, but to give a break from just having to listen to me. So I'll let you guys watch that, and then I'll just explain a little bit about how we applied for the EQIP project and how that's been helping us out.
There we go. Putting it the wrong way. Sorry about that.
We first came to Black Butte in 2007 and had a goal of having a place for our friends and supporters interested in railroad preservation and railroad culture to come together and develop our project, the Black Butte Center for Railroad Culture. It's a beautiful spot, it seemed perfect for us, right next to Mount Shasta, Black Butte, and right along the Union Pacific and Central Oregon and Pacific Main lines. Once at Black Butte, it took some time for us to realize that the forest lands we have were in really bad shape. They were really unhealthy, both for wildlife and also represented a huge fire danger. We realized we had a lot of work to do if we were going to have a healthier and safer forest.
I have eyes all over my head.
fire or was clear cut sometime around 40 years ago and just replanted with rows of ponderosa pine trees. So what was once a native, diverse forest, this was converted to be a pine plantation. And then there was different land ownership changes, and the people that bought this land weren't foresters, and they, I guess, just thought that this would all be land for development since we're close to the South Weed area. But that never happened, and so what we have here is what's known as a green desert. They're live trees, there's green canopy up high, but as you can see, there's just, everything is dead on the forest floor. All the shrubs that were in between the rows died and haven't had enough light, and all the trees have been stunted because there's this huge amount of competition for moisture and for sunlight. And it's just not at all what a ponderosa pine forest should be.
Couple familiar faces that you can look at here. There's the antelope brush. Yeah. This is all stuff that grew up in the clear cut 30 years ago and has been standing dead for 30 years. More or less because it doesn't rot, it's so light, and there's not much moisture.
Non-man caused, in all of Siskiyou County, the fire history is about 15-year fire reentry. It's based on the regrowth and the death of the dead component in the brush. They have fire starts all during a period, but you don't get the dead component in the brush being able to carry the fuel until you get about 15 years old growth on that pretty fast. The age of your trees in your plantation are roughly 40 years, 40 plus. That's at least 2 fire cycles right there. And prior to that, I can't tell you so much ground disturbance associated with that. But I would say, based on this right here, being so close to town, and a suppression effort has gone on for quite a while, you probably haven't seen a fire in maybe 5 cycles.
So the first thing we do is come in and limb, cut as many of these dead limbs off as we can, and all this dead antelope brush and dead manzanita, get it all cut, and then we come through and put in the burn bays and haul the brush to the burn bays and kind of do our initial burn.
From there, once we've got all of that burned, it really opens up the area, gives us room to work. From there, we can start the grading process. We all walk through together and we look at things and take out the trees. Like say you got 3 or 4 in a row and they're obvious dead on, you might take the 2 in the middle and leave one that will tell you you need to and one at the end. And that gives that space too. At the same time, breaks up the roads and takes out competition for water, which is really good.
Once we get a good pile going, around the burn bay in the open area, we feel it's safe on a calm day, especially after it's rained. We get it going and just try to clear the area of all the limbs. And once the trees are down, take all the limbs off and just burn them all up until the area is cleared up.
Even though it rained just yesterday, it's already pretty dry, and also we have this tarped up to keep this pile pretty dry.
As we thin out the trees in our land, we're trying to create groves, stands, small clearings, basically to try to recreate a more natural ponderosa pine forest. Among the pines, there are also a lot of other tree species, oaks, firs, cedars, and other trees. So we're trying to give those space to grow so the forest becomes more diverse and natural looking.
Ponderosas want to grow out in a big, bushy pyramid, and they don't naturally grow in dense stands really close together anywhere. But they're all fighting for water, and they're all fighting for light, and they're all the same age, and so they gradually start getting sick and start holding diseases, and a lot of them are just really puny.
One of the things, as we try to think about which trees to thin, after we've done the first initial limbing up to the trees and burning the brush, is since this was a ponderosa plantation, all the trees are in rows. So and we're trying to reduce the row effect so the forest starts to look more natural. Try to keep the dominant trees, the nice big trees like this one here, and even this one. But if you look at this row, like this is a real obvious one. It's kind of just in the way of the other trees, and it's not really, it's not going to do much. It's stuck in between all these other ones. So I just mark it. And then that's one we'll be cutting down.
Snags are a really important component of the structure and function of a natural forest. So we've been using a variety of methods to try to create snags. Brody and some of the other logging crew that we've had have been girdling some trees where they remove a strip of the bark from the base of the tree and kill the tree that way. We've also had a few trees that Brody removed all of the limbs and then topped. We've created some snags from that method.
So one of the things we're doing here is go up and cut down the tree to girdle. Some of it doesn't work that well in ponderosas. So walk up it, take the top and leave the stick. Ponderosas don't go back and take all the foliage away. So they'll die.
In addition to the bigger forest areas, we have some huge brush fields, old dead brush on our land. And trying to clear that all by hand is just daunting. That's why we needed to bring in the heavy guns.
Well, we're clearing some field here for the DVCRC. Got the T320 track machine with the Forester masticator head. And making a path here, as you can see.
What does this machine do?
This machine ultimately pulverizes the brush. As you can see here, it doesn't chip it, but these carbide teeth pull it through a steel cone on the back and it pulverizes. And, well, you can see what it leaves behind. Total devastation.
Over here, over there, over here, over here, over there, and sometimes over there. Here we are at the DVCRC. This is my Lucas mill. These are my boys. I got a blowing stuff into the mill. We bring us a portable mill. Look at it. Amazing guy. Come on, guys, let's go. We gotta put it all in here. We put it in, we break the mill down, and we start making lumber, which is all over here. And there comes Brody, he's waiting for it. We want to get his mug in here. Got the tape, man. You guys are ready to go. So I taught them everything they knew in 2 hours. Well, I'm straight from the property. We're thinning the forest here. These guys are thinners. They're doing excellent work. And, you know, this is a very ecological way to deal with your property. You make it forest-like again. You build the lumber that comes down. And it's a beautiful
We're going to build a fence. We're going to fence off the property. We can do many things with it. We can build a proper horseshoe pit. Have a
with this forestry project is to improve the value for wildlife that uses this land. We have a lot of diverse bird species that live here, as well as deer and bears, mountain lions, coyotes, bobcats, foxes. My background is a wildlife biologist focused on birds and bird ecology. We've done a lot of work in the forestry of trying to open it up, which allows birds to be able to move around the forest much easier. Just kind of some observational data that I've been collecting already kind of shows that birds are using some of those dense forest areas that they weren't before. So there have been some pine bark beetle outbreaks in this area of Siskiyou County. We've had a few trees that have some damage from pine bark beetles, and one of the reasons why it's good to promote woodpecker populations is because they're a predator on pine bark beetles and other insects, wood-boring insects that can be detrimental to the forest. The pine bark beetles are native to this area, but with poor forest management practices and fire suppression, the pine bark beetle populations have been able to get out of control. We've also been planting quite a few native species and some native trees, but also we're trying to plant some shrubs as well, including some species that have berries that are useful for foraging by wildlife, by birds and bears and other species of wildlife. So yeah, we've really been trying to make creation of good wildlife habitat an important component of the forestry work that we've been doing here.
Well, as you can see, we're having a lot of fun with this as we do it. That is really only part of the movie, so if you ever want to watch the whole thing, you can just find it on YouTube pretty easily. And I thought I'd just talk about a little bit about the EQIP programs. And I think as we got into realizing how much work we had to do, we were basically depending on volunteers. We'd have big work parties that would come and help out in the spring and the fall. But it was just getting to be an enormous amount of work to take on just as, with volunteers. And then there was also needing more equipment, larger chainsaws and bringing in chippers and that forestry masticator unit. And it was really, the budget we had as a small nonprofit and the core group was limited. And we just realized there was just a huge amount of work that really needed to be done. And I started asking around and had contacted both the Resource Conservation District and the Land Trust, and was at first heard about fuels reduction grants that maybe CAL FIRE would have something, and I thought since we were right on the edge of the city of Weed, we might be a good candidate for that, but it seemed to be hard initially to get something like that for us, and the NRCS program, the EQIP program, seemed like the best so in the early summer of 2012, I put in an application for that in June 5th, 2012. And it started quite a lengthy process. The application itself was not very difficult. It's something you can just go into just a few pages, and you know, we seemed like we qualified. It was really hard to know. You know, I'd worked in grants some, and it's always hard to know when you're applying for something. Is it going to be one of 100 or one of 2, or you know, what's your likelihood of getting something like this? And it is. There's a level of competitiveness in our ranking system that goes on. So it's certainly not automatic that you're going to get one of these grants if you apply for it. Once you apply, the first thing would happen, we had a site visit. I think after applying in early June, we had a site visit in September. And that was the first time the forester from NRCS, it wasn't James, it was his predecessor, came around and walked around the land and looked at what our situation was, and then he went back and wrote up a plan, a draft conservation plan for the program, and then we just kind of waited for a while, and I think we had a little bit, some sort of a difficult time maybe because there was a change in staff. The Charlie Deal, who'd done the first site visit, retired at the end of the year, and then it took a while for the office to appoint a new program officer for it, and then James came on in, I don't know when it was, in the middle of June. So he came on, and it had already been a year since we had applied, so then it sort of delayed the whole thing, and the director of the program had actually come out in the interim just to take a look and try to keep the momentum rolling around. So we'd had a second site visit from the office director. After James's visit, and we made, each one of these visits, we seen the possible amount of money went down a little bit, but it was, I think, partly there was some big changes going on in the U.S. government. This is federal money through the Farm Bill, and the sequestration process was going on. So I think it made a lot of federal agencies reluctant to go ahead with funding for a while, and the Farm Bill got delayed and all this stuff. But we ended up, they came back and James made a visit, and then we went through it some more, and kind of, I think probably the reductions in money in some way it was justified because he took a lot closer look at what was a brush field and there's various cost reimbursements that you can get for the brush field and the thinning of dense forest areas. So it just, took a heavy look at it. We finally had approval, and after waiting through some of this, uncertainties of the budget in September of 2013, then I found out we had to have one more step, which was a cultural resources survey, which in our case wasn't really that difficult to do. It was a one-day visit by a specialist just to make sure there's no Native American. I think the main thing is about Native American archaeological remains or other sensitive sites that could be disturbed by the total devastation of the masticator. So anyway, we were doing, because this is not a grant that covers 100%, or you can already have started to do some work on your land. It doesn't have, we were doing some ongoing work, but realized we were running out of money and resources. So this program came in right at the right time, I think, because we had the bulk of the work to do, and we had not, we're really running out of our own resources for it. So we got the go-ahead last year in October. So it had been a 15-month process, and then right away, actually, the Cultural Resources Survey got shut down because it was going to be on October 1st, but then that was the first day of the government shutdown. So we couldn't finish it. So we seem to hit a few of those things. But I think it's still been I'm highly appreciative and would recommend people that have, we're kind of unusual with this type of plantation, but there's a lot of flexibility from what I can tell in different types of situations that people face on their own land. What a few of the other things that I thought, one of the things is that the way it works, it's on a reimbursement basis. So you do have to have some level of resources or ability to do stuff yourself first, because you have to do the work and then it gets signed off on, and then you get paid. It's not like a grant to a nonprofit that gets paid up front, and then you can do the work and then just write a report. It's something where you have to do the work first. So, and it's meant as a cost share, so it doesn't mean that it's going to cover 100% of everything. You still have to put in a lot of your own resources. Us being a nonprofit, we've had the really good luck of having a lot of volunteers. We still have, even though we have this certain number of people that are paid, but to do, because they come and just work full time for 2 or 3 weeks. But we've also had a lot of people that just come and volunteer and help out for 2 or 3 days around a work party or something like that. The other, I think one of the challenges we still, it's been a very difficult year because of the drought. So I'd say one of the main challenges we've had is trying to do this work right in the middle of this terrible drought in Siskiyou County and in California. And some things we've done have even backfired a little bit. You saw those pictures of the snags being created, which in a healthy forest in not a drought condition would probably be fine, but we found that those dying snags have attracted some of the pine bark beetles, and actually it contributed to that issue. And that, if we're doing it over again, I think we would have maybe thought about that when you do that. Maybe not until you've after had a period of thinning and had the trees had a chance to grow stronger, and then maybe they could handle having some newly dead snags. But doing it in that dense of an area, right in the middle of a drought, turned out to be a problem. Another problem we have is that our neighbors are not in the program. We still have this large land developer that has 600 acres by us, and they don't care about the land at all and aren't doing anything with it. So, so there's still a fire danger and, really dense, poorly managed forest right next to us, which could be an issue. And the drought also affected trying to do new plantings, new native plantings, because normally you could plant in the fall and think that, well, stuff will winter over. This year we planted like maybe 40 or 50 seedlings in November. A lot of nice rare native species. They all went fried to a crisp in January.
Oh no.
Yeah. And who would have thought that you would need to drink water in January around here? Anyway, in the future we're moving towards working on kind of other things. We have a friend who's just really into doing habitat creation, and so he's doing a lot of work with actually creating little dens in the forest, because we do a lot of clearance of old brush, and so we're making little dens to promote in some of those really cleared out areas where it's a little bit scorched earth. He's making some cool little habitat structures for whatever, foxes or snakes, whatever. And then we're going to continue trying to do more planting of trees and shrubs and maybe even grasses, and try to promote mushrooms and things like that. So anyway, we're still figuring it out, but it's been really fun. And I think not only the NRCS, in a way, the site visits are sort of like an extension visit to me. Like, you get a lot of information and advice, and that together with, we've had people from the College of the Siskiyou's program, like Ray Hopt, who was in the film, out to give advice, and a lot of other people from connected with Land Trust and other groups. So it's been an education for me and really fun. One of our main guys on the saw crew, Chris, is right over here too. I just want to acknowledge him. He's been coming down from Oregon for the last 3 or 4 years and helping out with stuff here, and he could probably answer a lot of technical questions better than I could. So we'll leave it at that. And then I'll wait on questions, right? And then James will.
Are there any specific questions for Bruce right now that you just can't hold on to until the end of James' presentation? Or we can hold questions until after. Let's do that. Oh, okay.
Where did you get all those volunteers?
Well, it's I think it relates to our the railroad culture center thing. We have it's a lot of young people that are kind of adventuring around the country, and more than one of them have dropped off a boxcar right in front of our place. And but we have, I don't know, we have sort of a network of people, mostly on the West Coast, but around the country actually, that kind of like the aspect of it's sort of a unique nonprofit, I think, that's focused on trains but really is very welcoming to young people. It's a lot of people in their 20s that come and do that. So it's been really great because, I think that brings a lot of energy into the whole thing.
All right, so for all your non-burning questions, or was there one back here?
Yeah. Was your nonprofit status helpful in getting this grant?
No, actually, it has been helpful in other types of funding and some of the cost share money we have, but this was actually technically a grant to myself as the main landowner. The money's, I basically leased out all the land to the nonprofit, so at the rate of $1 a year that I make, and but it covers all the expenses, the property taxes and insurance, and so it's essentially, the money, I was sort of the conduit for the money, because it was, I don't know, maybe it could have, I don't know if it could have applied as a nonprofit or not, but I think because the nonprofit was leasing the land, it had to be to the actual landowner, so again, unlike, say, if you're applying to a foundation or something that's, we do get other funding from Arts Foundation and individual donations that are tax deductible, but this is specifically for landowners.
What was your estimate of the cost share percentage?
I haven't quite figured that out. I think since we've been doing the project, and it's hard, like, how do you value volunteer labor? And I think in some ways we do things more maybe intensively than some landowners would, because we have a big volunteer base, and so we can maybe craft things a little bit more than you could if you just had we're doing a wholesale masticator coming through, and so I don't know. I think that's something we should probably look at, but I think for this current round of since this grant started, it's covering the bulk of it. I would say the NRCS money is maybe covering, I don't know, 2/3 of what we're putting into it, and then, but then it really depends on how you value volunteer labor as well, because that's a big thing.
Did the reimbursement happen in increments or all at once? In other words, how much did you have to outlay before you got reimbursed?
Well, actually, I'm kind of happy to say today we just got approval for James was actually out on our land today and signed off on a approval of a section. It's interesting, originally our original contract was going to be over a 4-year period, and then as we turned it into a 3-year grant or 3-year program, so that there's a payment each of the 3 years. So it was divided. So the land was divided into segments, into like 4 different areas, and then 2 of them got combined into one. So it's not all, you don't have to do everything, and I think there's probably quite a bit of flexibility. It was basically up to us to determine how much we could do in a certain amount of time, and then suggest that be put in one yearly cycle. We were in the application process. Did find out that doing things in 3 years or less makes you a lot more eligible. If it's got to be longer term than that, it seemed like it put you down lower in the rankings. But James could probably answer those questions better than I answer these.
So what is the purpose of the grant? Is it for thinning and pruning, or is it for fire suppression, or exactly what you have to have to get the grant?
Well, it was for a combination of fuels reduction and fire, protection from fire, and trying to restore something to be more akin to a natural forest. So something better for wildlife habitat, basically biodiversity. Let's say to try to fit and to look at density of trees, because our stands were way too dense, and so it promotes the healthy growth of trees, which I mean, for us, one of our main values is for wildlife habitat, but that could be because you want to, or, you know, looking at being able to have healthy trees for eventually cutting down or whatever your purpose is. So it seems like there's a lot of flexibility in the program in that. But yeah, it was a combination of the fuels reduction because of our extreme fire danger and then, you know, having a healthier forest for habitat, and just because it's a lot nicer to be in a healthy forest. You know, the ambiance is so much nicer now.
So why don't we turn it over to James now, because he'll get into more of the details of the program itself from the NRCS side. So at this point, I'd like to welcome up James Donahue, the forester with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, to talk to you about EQIP, and then afterwards you can ask questions to both James and Bruce. Maybe with this extra knowledge, you'll have some more questions for Bruce and then some for James. So, James.
Thanks, Karen. So, thanks everyone for coming out tonight, and thank you, Bruce. It's normally our programs are confidential, with like an agreement with the landowner. They can talk about it as much as they want, but we won't divulge any of their information unless they want us to. So, having Bruce here tonight to talk about his perspective on the program is really valuable, I think, and kind of something we don't do that often as an agency. So, again, my name is James Donahue. A forester for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. It's the NRCS. And so tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about that EQIP program. So just to kind of start, if I can figure out how to work this. Oh. So I want to do a little exercise. How many people here are landowners? I recognize some of you. So quite a few of you then. So maybe some of you could share, what does your ideal forest look like? Just kind of shout out some things, some characteristics that would be an ideal forest. Healthy.
Spacious.
Spacious.
Diverse.
Diverse. Oh, I heard something else over here. No.
Wildlife.
Wildlife.
Water.
Water. So those are all things that are both on the site itself and maybe downstream benefits too that I heard. So I think you heard Bruce talk about some of his ideal forest conditions, and that was kind of the start. You know, once he started to realize he had this resource that maybe wasn't his ideal resource. You know, that's kind of the start. You need to know where you want to go in order to get there, right? So, I think our program then was kind of his tool for getting in that direction. And he was already doing it on his own, but what I'll talk about later is kind of, we're just kind of an assistance to the landowner to help them achieve what their objectives are on that property. So, you know, what is the NRCS? Like Kara said, we're an agency within the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We were created out of the Dust Bowl, actually, in the 30s, as the Soil Conservation Service. And our original purpose was to reduce soil erosion and to conserve sort of our agricultural resources that were rapidly being depleted. You know, they were literally blowing away. But we've kind of expanded our role, and now we're called the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So we don't just look at soil erosion, we're looking at all sorts of things that we consider resource concerns. And so I'll kind of get to that. You know, what things are our programs going towards, and they're going towards fixing resource concerns. And kind of our mission then is that we provide technical and financial assistance to private landowners to help them conserve their natural resources. So a lot of that technical side could just be people calling up with questions about the property. That's the kind of extension side that we offer. Come out and just take a look and answer minor technical questions. But that financial side is kind of what the focus is tonight. You know, how do we help landowners actually do work on their land? So one of the many programs that our agency offers is the EQIP program. So that's the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And kind of what that means is we're providing a financial incentive for a landowner to do some sort of conservation practice on their land. So it is funded through the Farm Bill, which is supposed to be a bill authorized every 5 years in Congress. And just as I kind of said, it's just a payment incentive to a landowner. So if someone's already doing something on their own, maybe they don't really need EQIP to do it. But it's just kind of to help them go that extra step, maybe. A couple other things, we do have a number of other programs. Some focused on wetlands, some focused on conservation easements. So, helping us, a landowner, not develop that land for another purpose, to maintain it in agricultural production. But tonight we're just going to talk about EQIP. So, who is eligible? I don't spend a lot of time talking about this because it's pretty much everyone. If you're a landowner or you have control of land through some sort of deed or title. In the past, it was just agricultural producers, but that's been expanded to forest owners because forestry is agriculture. Trees produce fiber, fuel, and wood. So the third one there, you have to make less than $900,000 a year. That doesn't give a lot of interest. Now that doesn't apply to you. And then the last one is kind of a weird thing, but if the land is already enrolled in one of our other programs, we can't double up with things, and there's some instances where that happens. Some people might actually be familiar with CRP, Conservation Reserve Program. That's not a program we, through our agency, it's through our sister agency, but it's something that we administer. So what's kind of an ideal project then? It's kind of a unfortunate thing, but I'll get to last. But basically anyone with forestry in this instance, with limited commercial options for their forest. I try to recommend people who have commercial options for their forest go that route because then they can actually make money from their land, which is a good thing. But some of those examples are projects that are really not cost effective. So oak restoration work where it's a labor intensive process. They're just going in and pulling out non-commercial trees. Or maybe pre-commercial thinning work, which is basically thinning a stand for non-commercial products as an intermediate step to help that develop towards some sort of more productive or more commercial state. Or some of the ladder and surface field reduction that you saw is really labor intensive and it's not really something that a lot of landowners would do on their own. And then people have limited resources, financial resources. Some of our programs are really geared towards covering some of those costs. So, if you make a certain percentage of the median annual income in this county, we pay for 90% of that work. So we're really gearing towards people who can't afford to do a lot of the work on the land. That accomplishable within 3 years, that was definitely a point. If the project's going to take longer than that, usually it's a lower ranking project for us. We really like people to be able to have those immediate benefits for themselves and for everyone else, and not be something that they're going to fall under some sort of hardship and be unable to complete the project 7 or 10 years down the line. And then the last one, typically all of our projects need to be larger than 10 acres in size or connected in some way to another treatment. But that's not a hard, fast kind of rule. I get people who have less than that all the time. I can't really say no. So, but generally, if it's larger than that, it's something that we're really interested in working on. So some of the issues, these are resource concerns. So you have a number of things going on here. This is actually Bruce's property beforehand. I don't know if some of you so that upper one there. So we're looking at, not just fire resilience, but we're also looking at forest health, growth, vigor, the resilience to bark beetles, like you mentioned. On the end there, I think there's actually an oak in the middle of that forest, and that oak is actually dying because lack of fire in that stand. There's no maintenance in that open forest condition that it would have had. We have overgrown brush. That's decking brush. We do a lot of brush work, and then in areas where we have excessive regeneration and, you know, the stand is stunted. Now, those are kind of those forest health issues that we're working on. Some of the other tough things that we do a lot of are conifer or juniper encroachment on oak stands. Again, that's more that non-commercial project that you know, it's really to benefit wildlife. Because oaks are considered a keystone species in a lot of their systems where they're found, and they produce a lot of forage and a lot of mass. So we do have a few programs that are targeted at maintaining those oaks in the stands that they're in, or just enhancing them where they're at. We also do you know, erosion control, road stabilization work. This is something I haven't really got to work on since I'm here, but we do have an engineer in our office and help people design roads, or help people you know, build better roads that are less erosive and lower maintenance. We also do reforestation work. We typically have initiatives for post-fire reforestation. We do livestock water development. We do invasive species removal. So these are all smaller things that we can do as part of our projects. You know, these are all basically resource concerns that I'm looking for when I go out and need a plan. So one of the other things that we do is these cooperative forest management plans. It's basically this forest management plan that CAL FIRE and the NRCS and the Forest Service and the Tree Farm organization have come up with to help landowners kind of articulate their objectives for their property and inventory their property, and then develop future plan or future activities to kind of help get their land to that desired, you know, ideal state. It's kind of a mid-level and expensive document. I think that if as far as California is concerned, you know, you have timber harvest plans that are quite expensive, non-industrial timber management plans that are kind of expensive, and then this is just kind of getting your feet wet in terms of forest management. But having one of these documents in place allows the landowner to apply for funding through CAL FIRE and through our organization to help you achieve some of those activities that are in the plan. So yeah, we pay for you to hire an RPF who will inventory the property and develop some of those future projects. And it's, again, cost sharing. I'll get into that a little bit. And that's totally out there. What's kind of the process? You know, Bruce talked about this a little bit. It starts with an application. You know, we have two applications. One's just for technical assistance, one's for financial assistance. But it really just starts with filling out that 2-page application. So the deadline, I'll just throw that out there, for 2015 applications is November of this year. So we try to work with landowners the year before so that they have something to put in for that next year. So then we call the landowner, arrange a field visit, and meet with the landowner and basically ask, what do you want to do with the property? You know, what are your goals here? And you know, what are your constraints? Some people have financial constraints, some people have time constraints. We prioritize what they want to do and develop a conservation plan. So that's kind of the document that is an even smaller version of that forest management plan. But that's the document that lays out what the landowner actually is going to be doing for the property. And this is a back and forth, multiple site visits kind of thing, really targeted to develop what the landowner wants. You know, I kind of guide the landowner towards those desired conditions, but I don't tell the landowner what they have to do with the property. Ultimately, the landowner is the decision maker, so the plan is for them. So a little bit about those. Basically, the conservation plan just identifies what the resource concern is, and then provides the treatment alternatives, and usually there's a couple things that the landowner can do to fix that resource concern. But identify those alternatives, and then details kind of a time frame for accomplishing that. It's really a short document. It's not really that informative, I think, to most landowners. Usually, just the meetings and the discussions are more helpful. But kind of an example, here's a resource concern as we would see it. So decreased plant productivity and healthy vigor. It's kind of a mouthful, but that's a resource concern from our perspective. So what would be the treatment for that? We have pre-tertial planting. So then, this is unfortunately off here, but basically the conservation plan would say that there's a treatment for this resource concern and it's pre-commercial thinning, and that needs to, it's going to happen in December of 2014, and it's going to be 20 acres. And then the slash disposal, give it the material a year to cure. It's going to happen in December of 2015. That's also going to be 20 acres. And then along with that, we would have a cost estimate. So, what are the costs? Right? Every single treatment practice that we have has an associated cost that we'll pay for. They're generalized costs that have been come up with in basically a multi-state area, so I don't have a lot of flexibility in what the exact cost is. Basically, if it fits in to a larger category, that's the cost. So if you're cutting between 200 and 500 trees per acre that are an average size of 3 inches in diameter, that's this one cost over here. That's kind of the flexibility that I get. So there's quite a range there, but that's kind of my direction to how I determine what cost of different practices get. And then each landowner falls into a certain category, and that's that cost rate. So as I mentioned, if you make, I think it's like half of the median annual income in Siskiyou County, you fall into this 90%, not cost share, but the payment rate that we give you is 90% of the anticipated cost of the project. Socially disadvantaged is if you're of an ethnicity or race that's in a number of different categories. I can tell you what those are if you're interested. We do have, it's kind of confusing. It's new to the 2014 Farm Bill. But we have a veteran, it was just called veteran farmer, but when you look at it, it's really just a veteran beginning farmer. And then a beginning farmer is defined as a landowner or that has not been farming for more than 10 years. So I think in Bruce's case, since he owned the property for less than 10 years, he was considered a beginning farmer. So when he said it cost him about 2/3, we were saying that our costs were about 75% of what the treatment should actually cost. So, unfortunately, he's covered a little bit more, but he's also taken quite a bit more care than I think most contractors would take with the treatments. Then everyone else is just in this 50% category. And then the expectation is that the landowner foots the bill for the rest. But we don't ask for any receipts. So, whether you do the work yourself or have a contractor do it, it's just kind of what it is. Whatever we give you is what it is. You can't ask for more, and we won't ask for any back. So that's kind of the other thing. How does the project get selected? So every application with the conservation plan is going to be ranked. And there's a number of different criteria that are open to the public. Everyone can know what the ranking criteria are. I unfortunately don't know off the top of my head because they change every year. But there are a number of different factors, if it's in a WUI, a wildland urban interface, or if it's going to be done within 3 years, or if it's, there's all these different things. They're all ranked and you get points. And then they go down based on how much money we were given this year. And unfortunately, it's not just Siskiyou County, but it's Siskiyou, Delmore, Humboldt, Mendocino, Lake, and we're all in the same funding pool. And they go down through them, and the higher ranking ones get funded. So the more resource concerns that your conservation plan is fixing, the higher the ranking of the project is. That's kind of the basic of it. And so even at this point, the landowner is under no obligation to go through with it. Until I give you the call and say your project is selected, you're under no obligation to continue to work with me or to do anything at all. Until I actually call you up and say, hey, you got funded, do you want it? You want the money? And if you you sign the contract, and we'll work with you to finish it. And just as Bruce said, it could be several years until the plan's developed and until you get funded. So, wow, what does that say? What is the process for implementing a forestry EQIP? So Bruce kind of alluded to that. Once you get the contract, you can either do the work yourself, or you can contract it out to somebody else. So you do the work, or the contractor does the work, and you give me a call and say the work's done. So in Bruce's case, however many acres are done, come on out and take a look at it. So I come out to certify that the treatment meets those specifications that we designed together, the landowner and me, or my predecessor and me, in most cases these days. And if the treatment meets those standards and specifications, we fetch a check. We don't do it out in the field. It actually takes about 10 days, but that's kind of the process. So this is an example of a project. You can see some of the red trees here. I actually marked this with the landowner himself, and this was one of our oak projects. But after the treatment, it's kind of cool to get to see this. It's something I didn't get to see when I was with the Forest Service, so I'm actually really excited to get to work with so many different people and get to see so many projects being implemented on the ground. So with that, I'm done. And there's my contact information, and hopefully we've got time for questions.
So first I want to give a big hand to Bruce and James. All of our presenters, whenever we have presenters, they put in all this time and effort to come down, and we really appreciate them sharing with us their experiences. So I'd like to open it up to questions for either Bruce or James. If you have some extra questions now. Yes.
I'm just curious about Bruce's neighbor that he said has 600 acres of forest that's not cared for at all. Is there any obligation that a landowner has to take care of that, or?
I'm not sure. I think there would be, the CAL FIRE would be concerned about it, because if you're at the pilot gas station in South Weed, it starts right behind there, and they've had several fires, small fires that like hitchhikers coming through the campfire have set, and but they haven't seemed to do anything about it so far.
So I think at least my interpretation of the California Forest Practice Rules, only if they had a structure or they were doing some sort of logging activity, do they have any sort of obligation to either protect that structure with defensible space or clean up / from their logging activity. So otherwise, if there's
So
no
fire danger to surrounding community members or anything like that, that's not relevant.
Not unless it was something that they caused from a logging operation.
Okay.
That would be.
They can let it be just as rather as they want.
Yeah, it's their land. Yeah.
Well, in Southern California, they used to knock on your door and say, "Hey, you got to clean this stuff up."
And that's
or we're going to come and we'll bill you for it.
Yeah, if you have a structure, you have
I see.
an
That's
obligation
true. Yeah.
to clear your defensible space, the 100 feet around your house.
James, how many of these are you guys funding a year on average? And do you have a budget level number like $100,000?
I couldn't tell you. It's highly variable. Last year we didn't think we were going to get any funding at all, like you were saying, the sequestration. And then July, August, September, our fiscal year ends in September. End of September, we got a phone call and said we have a lot of money, spend it fast. And we started going through that list of those higher ranking projects and just got a lot funded last year.
So how many projects is that, 20, 50?
And another thing, we do a lot of range improvement work or irrigation improvement work. So between them all, it's got to be. I think it just in forestry alone, it's probably close to 15 to 20 a year that get funded. But that's, some projects are $150,000, some projects are $20,000.
Yeah, I understand.
But usually the limit on it, the maximum that we'll pay on a project is $150,000. but there's exceptions that they can go over that. It's kind of a rare thing.
Most people apply for both NRCS and CFIP at the same time and see which one gets funded first.
I try to recommend that to folks. So CFIP, for those who aren't aware, is the California Forest Incentive Program. Improvement. So that's the improvement. Ours is the incentive. So yeah. And so they have a similar to us. They pay for different thinning projects or slash disposal projects. And then, so every CAL FIRE office basically has a budget, I think, that they can work from, but their budget seems to be less reliable than ours. So I recommend people put in for both. And I've actually heard from people that if you tell CAL FIRE that you put in for both, sometimes they won't fund your project just because they know that we're potentially funding the project. So you don't have to, I don't think you have to tell them that you put in for ours, but you couldn't pay, both of us wouldn't pay for the treatment, but it would just be a new potential source of money to get work on.
I just have a question. When you do all the thinning, now those trees line up the bottom of the forest, and what percentage you take out, what percentage do you leave? You leave some for habitat, right?
And it's something that my predecessor didn't try to, yeah, even myself, I don't narrow in on what has to happen. Usually it's feasibility. We don't make people take out all the large diameter wood that's left in there. Basically, I just, the slash, the tops of the trees, the branches need to be burned, chipped, skinned out. I don't care how they
I
do
guess
it.
my question more is what's healthy?
What's healthy?
What would you want to get to?
Under 20 tons per acre. If that's a meaningless number. It depends on the size, and but that's kind of 20 tons would be for all the material, including the duff and everything. That's kind of the number that fuel managers or forest fuels managers use as like a manageable number in terms of.
We were given a certain formula of density of trees per acre to shoot for, and I saw that formula, I think, that your predecessor was using. It was kind of, it was dependent on the size of the tree, the average size of the tree, and then what you should shoot for density per acre, and this might have been, depends on the type of tree, I don't know, maybe this was in a ponderosa. But we had, like for our area, for the size of our trees, in the program, it was, the goal was 170 trees per acre. But I saw that if they were bigger trees, it would be less, obviously.
But that wasn't your question, Tom? Was it?
No, I was just wondering, we're doing some thinning ourselves, we have all these dead trees lining up 4 to 4, and there's that time you need to come out.
Yeah, and that's something, I mean, if someone were to call and ask me, I could come out and measure how much. It's a laborious process of putting in line intercept transects called Brown's transects, but
20 tons per acre, you're almost at the cusp of economical chipping then, to chip and remove it. So you want to look at that option at that point.
and back there.
Well, but to leave very much slash needs a significant fire risk.
Exactly, and that's why if you leave the larger stuff though, that's not so much of a fire risk. Typically, the logs will retain moisture. They're not as consumptive in a fire. They'll burn once, if it's hot enough, they'll burn and they'll continue to burn for a long time. But they're not as big of a flashy risk as some of the slash.
Well, if you use a masticator,
If you use a masticator, then yeah, it's
you just leave it, you don't have to burn it.
it's all gone. It's small chips kind of throughout the forest that'll hopefully break down. They can. They really can, yeah. That's something I kind of cringe at sometimes if I see used too much. But, those sites will heal relatively quickly. The duff annual litter fall in the forest will kind of put a new organic layer over the top pretty fast. But yeah, it is something on steeper slopes that isn't really an option to.
Is there a driveway of land somewhere, or good access easily some other way to give you some where you want to go? Where you want to go with every property? So that, I'm thinking in terms of preparing so you can discuss it.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We don't have any tools like that. Usually if someone calls me, I just kind of, what do you have? How many acres? Where is it located? Do you want to generate revenue from it, or do you just want it to be habitat? Do you just want to reduce, the risk of fire? Kind of figure those things out, and then once I'm on the ground, then I can kind of start to make specific recommendations to kind of help. Well, what is your end state here? But no, we don't have any planning tools like that. Are you aware of planning tools?
Sorry, I missed the question.
She was looking for tools to help landowners plan with what they are, what they want from their forest.
Well, wouldn't that be a part of the collaborative management plan?
Yeah, so it's definitely a service that I can provide, but we don't have any specific tools.
Yeah, you can put in a request for planning assistance, and he can come visit your property and have a conversation with you about what you might want to do. And part of that could be just the technical or the planning assistance, or part of that could be you could try to do this collaborative forest management plan, which could help you fill in those ideas about what you want to do for a project.
So you mentioned that both the you don't know ahead of time what the available funding is going to be. Understood. And also the ranking seems flexible. You don't really know what the priorities are going to be when the projects are selected.
Exactly.
And you mentioned ideal projects that historically have been funded.
Yeah.
Before the process is initiated, though, are there things that your agency can do or a forester can do that will help the landowner do things that will neither jeopardize the ranking of the project before you come out, or do things that will help the ranking? Because personally, I'd like to, continue and try to get my work done, but I don't want to do stuff. I'm not saying I don't want to do the work that needs to be done, but I don't want to do something stupid because I'm ignorant about forestry. And then in the process, on such a large scale, well, like for example, I wouldn't want to chip diseased trees and blow like the dwarf mistletoe all over the place. It's like, hey, where are you going to get the and run everything down and start over again, just for like a wild, crazy example.
Yeah.
I want to do something dumb. So should we hire a forester to come out there and advise us and let the forester know, we're going to put in we want to get hooked up with the EQIP program next year.
Registered professional foresters are the biggest resource I think that people have for helping them plan any sort of potential management action out of their forest, or just helping them develop some sort of management plan. But there's a cost with that, whereas our service is free. And usually if somebody just wants information, I would tend to go with the free resource over the costly resource, but that, I think it's incredibly important for a landowner who's interested in doing some sort of long-term management of timber on their property to have RPF, a registered professional forester, and develop that relationship with that forester who will be an asset to them for years to come. Because it's not just a one-time deal. That person is going to, that RPF is going to help them develop a management plan, whether it's a cooperative forest management plan through us, or just a timber harvest plan at the other end. And then they're going to be there for that landowner the whole way through, as they have disease or insect issues as they continue to want to generate income or maintain habitat on the property. So, we're a good free resource, but we're not a substitute for having an RPO. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well,
I can help you. If you give me a call, I can come out and after talking with you, and you say, well, I really want to maintain my forest as wildlife habitat and reduce the threat of fire, but I'm also interested in generating income from this. And I'm probably going to say, well, here's some things that you can do, short term, but then really long term, you're going to need forester to help you manage that.
But the NRCS is available outside of the EQIP program to just at least provide some free guidance.
Exactly. So that's that technical assistance side. There's still an application for that, and that's just for our internal, our internal purposes of keeping track of, people's time and stuff. But we have that it's in our mission basically to provide that service. It's not in our mission necessarily. Initially we didn't provide any financial assistance to landowners. We had no federal funding for conservation programs. Our purpose was just to go help people get them ideas of what to do to their property. We have no means of doing that.
Could I put in a plug?
Yeah.
For forestlandowners.org. Most of you are forest landowners here. It's an association for small timber landowners. We're having our annual meeting in Mount Shasta this year. Usually we have it all over the state. This year it's going to happen to be in Mount Shasta. We're going to be looking at Thamar's property and a few others, and $50 a year to join.
And there's probably some really good resources on their website actually.
Right.
That's a that didn't.
Yeah, forestlandowners.org. Go there, take a look, see what you think. I think it's a great organization, especially for small landowners.
Speaking of plugs, I'll just say, we're doing these fall, usually early spring and late fall restoration periods, and we've really gotten a good team of individuals together, and I think as we kind of decrease the amount of time we need, some of them could be available if some of you are ever doing restoration thinning operations and just don't need a big company, but just we're interested in having one or two people to help, and you're getting some grant money or have some free services for it. We could have people available that might be interested in doing additional work, sort of contiguous to when they're off doing their work. If that's ever of interest, let us. You can get a hold of me through Kara or the Land Trust, or we have a website with contact info for bbcrc.org.
In the back there.
Would your organization give advice for creekfront property, for habitat issues, if we wanted to just know what do we want to have here, what's healthy here, or is that kind of outside your purview?
It's not my specialty, but I get asked a lot of questions that aren't my specialty. I think is there an extension wildlife biologist for? I don't know if anyone's familiar with the California Extension Services.
Yeah.
They got a new extension force.
They have
Yeah, Ryan was saying this.
Yeah.
I don't think he meant he knows too much about wildlife.
In some states they have extension biologists that would be able to answer specific questions.
The wildlife biologist?
Wildlife
My girlfriend.
Yeah. So maybe.
I need a girlfriend?
But give me a call. Maybe it's something I can answer. Yeah, maybe it's. I'll try.
I'm a member of the Quail Hill Owners Association. We've got 50 acres, but unfortunately, they're individually owned parcels, and 2.5 to 5 acres. So it doesn't sound to me like we qualify for your. It would be based on the individual owners, not the association.
Yeah. So, like I said, we can deal with that number. Like we don't have to have 10 acres, but if you got some people together that are all adjacent, we would be able to work with those specific landowners who put in applications and help them plan something. But another thing we don't do is with that defensible space, the area within 100 feet of your home, we don't do that because that's kind of the landowner's legal obligation to reduce that area. So,
Well, our concern is not 100 feet around our houses, it's only 3 for now. It's the rest of it,
yeah.
2.5 acres or 5 acres, which is huge. Right now, it's a huge fire bomb in the city of Buckville, south end of Mount Shasta. If that place ever goes up, the entirety of the shelter complex and all those houses on Washington and all. And probably our houses too.
Neighbors that don't treat their properties are your worst enemy.
And so we're concerned about doing something, even those that don't have houses up there. Doing our due diligence on our, but we'd be willing to get people together. But very few of them own, more than 2.5 to 5 acres at most.
Yeah. So that's
So would you be willing to consider that as kind of a project?
yeah, but basically, how it worked is every landowner would have to put in an application.
Yeah.
And then hopefully you guys would have some sort of idea with like what you wanted to be treated like across. I'm assuming that a lot of landowners don't necessarily know what they want done. I can go out there and plan individually with them, but if you had some greater scheme of treating, this ridge and all these landowners who live on that ridge, then that would probably be helpful to do first, and then target those landowners to put in applications, and then I can come out and work with them.
Are there other resources? I mean, you talk about CAL FIRE, I mean,
Fire safety council.
Yeah.
What,
do you know?
Over the city of Mount Shasta.
Do you know what fire state council you're in? Area? Is it it's on the
Mount Shasta
Mount Shasta area?
Yeah.
So you'd want to get in contact with Dale and Giselle Nova, and, that's kind of information I can give to you,
And typically, they've been really good in the past about getting funding to do exactly those kind of treatments through the California Clearinghouse for grants, but they've been having some problems in recent years getting them. So they've been really successful in the past, but now those projects are starting to slow down a bit. But it's worth definitely talking with them about and maybe getting them involved. Because those also have some sort of cost share in there, and you're not allowed to use federal funds as part of that cost share. So our EQIP programs wouldn't count as that cost share.
I got 2 quick questions. Is your girlfriend available for consultation?
Well, she's in Cambodia right now, but she could be this summer. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, we'll talk. All right, the other thing is, this has been nagging me. Your pyrotech there who was studying the fire, was he doing burn piles? It looked like he was doing a forest floor burn.
No, I think that was basically piles.
Piles.
Yeah, we have too much stuff to do a general, controlled burn, so.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we have a series of piles.
okay, thanks.
I think that the material is nearby, that you saw that cut material behind there, because they're chunking stuff in there as that pile is burned down there, just
Yeah,
all stacked
because
up.
we have issues with wind where we are sometimes, and so we sometimes have a relatively small pile that we start with,
Yeah.
and then we toss more on, and it's a safer way to do it. We haven't had any problems so far.
You haven't done long enough.
over here.
In Bruce's case, did you do very much chipping at all, or did you mostly do application and burning?
We did some chipping first, I think, with a local tree service, because we just kind of along where we had roads and could get it in. We tried doing that a bit, but the amounts and the cost of it got to be, with using one of the, because you can't, it's not just a little chipper that you get at Weed Building Supply, it's you have to have a big industrial style one, and it gets, and they don't come, they come with people, can't seem to just rent. And it ends up being like $100 an hour or something, and so a masticator is actually cheaper or about the same for a day, but it does so much more. Then it goes in one day, 8 hours, you can do a lot of brush fields, and they function as a chipper too. Basically, you can have a big pile of limbs and slash, and it'll just go right through it. It's a little different product, but it's also, I don't know, essentially like a wood chipper.
I just thought, I've done small burn piles and fed them, and it just seems like a very slow process, and I've ended up taking the utility trailer to the dock for brush.
Yeah. You'd have to have many semi or boxcar fulls.
Well, I'm really good at packing.
I was gonna say, we work on piles, not like Gazelle, we have a little forklift or four-wheel drive tractors, you pile away. Small piles, big as one, drop it on piles. Little tractors. Where it's flat enough, it doesn't see all the time.
Right. Yeah. It just depends if you have volunteers to do that work.
Any other questions? I'd like to make some plugs before, and then if there are more questions, feel free to ask them after I make these plugs. First of all, I do want to mention the RCDs do work closely with NRCS, so if you don't feel like making the drive up to Wairika, we do have applications for the request for planning assistance, which we can give to you. We also do have copies of the application. I wouldn't recommend just going out and taking one home and writing one up, but it does include James' contact information there too, and you can look over and see what might be involved in the application process. So we have them at our office, which is inside the Land Trust office at 522 Alma Street. So feel free to come, stop by, pick up one of the requests for assistance, or have a look over what the EQIP application looks like. We're more than happy to go through that and help to the extent that we can, and then for the rest, refer to James for whatever you need. I also like to mention that we did print out a few copies of a white paper Bruce had written up with, several people with the Black Railroad Restoration, Center for Railroad Culture, and it's pretty interesting just to read through what it is, a little more detail on what he showed you in the video and in the presentation of what they did on that property. So if we do run out, get you more copies, so feel free to send me an email or give me a call at 926-2259, and we can set you up with that. I also want to make some plugs for some future events next month. We're going to have a pretty busy month of a lot of different workshops. Since you're all forest landowners for the most part, you may be interested in a 2-day workshop we're putting on. It ties to the land workshop. It's a workshop in succession planning. So, a lot of times we don't really think about what's going to happen to our property when our heirs, our children take it over. But this is a really interesting 2-day workshop on sort of the steps you might want to take with communicating with your family to ensure that not only does your land get passed down and not chopped up, but also your values for that land get passed down. So that will be on the 24th of April will be the first day, and May 8th will be the second day. We have brochures up there. There's a $10 registration fee for the workbooks. And we'll be having a lawyer on hand too to answer questions, the legalese questions that might come up through that workshop. The next thing we're doing is we are partnering with the University of California Cooperative Extension, as is the Ties to Land workshop, to put on a fire safe home workshop, and Ron Berryman actually will be presenting there, as will I, on some of the things that are going on in the area to help make your home fire safe, both on your own property and then on industrial or other properties as well. So that will be held in McLeod at Scott Hall on the 29th, I believe. I might be getting 26th. Thank you. And we have the flyer up there, so 9/6, they kind of look the same. Of April. So these are all April. And then the presentation will be followed up with a tour to the field break that the McLeod Fire Safety Council has done in McLeod. And then the last thing, we are partnering with Cal Trout for our next Forest Stewardship Workshop Series presentation, and that will be on the 30th. It will be here. We'll be talking about fire and water. How does catastrophic fire impact water, and what's the sort of things that we can do to mitigate that impact? as well as mitigating impact of forced stewardship activities on water quality. So we'll be partnering with CalTrout on that one, partnering with University of California Cooperative Extension on the other two, and they're all up there. Feel free to take whatever you like. If there are no more questions, one more look. Okay, well, I want to thank James and Bruce again for their expertise. Have a good night.
Flow for service.
What's that? It's Central Street exit by chiropractor. You should turn right, take another right, like immediate right. That's right. That's right.